Okay, well, welcome to Can You Dig It? Archaeology at Monticello. We're at a virtual field trip talking to Monticello archaeologists about what they do, and they brought some cool things for us to look at. We've got a class joining us today, third and fourth graders, right, from Virginia?
Yes!
All right. Hi, guys, and thanks for being here. And I'm Melanie Boyer. I'm the manager of digital learning here at Monticello. But I want to introduce the stars of the show today. First up, we have our archaeologist, Bea Arndt, and she will be talking to you a little bit about what she does, showing you some cool things. Bea?
Hey guys!
Hi!
Hey, that's what I like to see. So my name is Bea. That kind of energy works really well in the field, and I'll just tell you that. So I might be calling on you to do some work for me later today, tomorrow maybe. Think you're up for that? Maybe do some archaeology?
Yes!
That's good.
Great.
So I want to tell you a little bit about what we do and how we do it. We have a long list of questions, and hopefully we'll be able to get through and answer your questions today. And then I'm going to pass it on to Beth Sawyer, who is also an archaeologist. She's going to show you some pretty cool stuff that we've been finding here at Monticello. Okay? So the first thing is that we archaeologists actually don't dig dinosaurs. This is something a lot of people don't know about us, but we don't dig dinosaurs up at Monticello. We really focus on the historic period. So anything after 1600s. So the way we do that, though, is we dig in the dirt. We dig in units and squares. And so does anybody want to guess why we dig in squares? Ooh.
I'll call on him. Sarah.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Sarah, look at the camera. Come up and stand.
I think you dig squares because you don't want to like damage anything in the ground, and you'll be able to see like the shape better.
That is right. Yeah, we dig in squares because then we know exactly where artifacts or architectural elements are when we find them. We have a huge map somewhere. We have a huge map so we know where everything is on the mountain and across the entire plantation. Thomas Jefferson originally owned about 5,000 acres, of which the foundation owns half. So we need to know where everything is so we can continue the history, telling you, and so that we all learn about it. So we dig very carefully, and we record as much information as we possibly can. Archaeology is a lot like we call it a destructive science. So it's like if you were to read a book but rip the pages out of the book as you do it, that's what archaeology is. We dig by layers. So it's called stratigraphy, big crazy word, I can barely say it. And it's the layers of dirt. And so they all are different. And we dig by that, and we do something crazy. Do you see this?
Yeah!
Okay, this is a brown paper bag, and it's got a whole lot of writing on it.
Wow.
But all this information tells us exactly where we found some artifacts. So we dig in squares, we dig in levels and kind of layers of dirt, and then we record the information in these bags, and then artifacts get put in these bags. We also, oh my gosh, you think you have a lot of homework? We have a lot of homework. This is an example of a sheet of paper where we record everything you've ever wanted to know about while we're digging. So we record location, how deep we're digging. We even record the color of the soil. We record the color of the soil, and then just to make it more fun, we draw maps, so we know where everything was, right? So it's telling you how if you were to read a book and rip it out, you'd never see it again. This is the way that we record the archaeology as we're doing it. So we've got some artists in the group. I'll be counting on you later for some work. So this is all what happens in the field. Then there's a second part that a lot of people don't know about, where the artifacts then get sent down to the lab. And that's where Beth and I spend most of our days. They get cleaned, washed just with a toothbrush and some water, and then they get taken out of those ugly brown bags, and we get put into some fancy bags with some tags. Again, locating those tags tell us where those artifacts come from. So we always know where these artifacts come from. And we get all kinds of fun stuff. They get nice and pretty. I'm having way too much stuff here. We're going to show you all of it. It looks like little jumbled up bits, but these are really neat artifacts. This is a bag of ceramics. It's hard to see it from because they're so small, but we're going to show you bigger examples of it so you'll be able to see it. But we've got some window glass. We got some iron, some nails, some wire. So these are examples of the types of things that we find at Monticello. So we wash them, then we put them in these bags, and we put labels with them, and then we catalog them. And that just means we take all this information and we count each little piece of glass assured. We weigh them, we take measurements, we even take photos of it. If you go to our website, you can see some of those really neat artifacts that we've found, in addition to the ones we're going to show you today. And all of that gets cataloged, and so then we can share information with other archaeologists who are digging at the same time in the same period. So that's pretty much it. You've got the digging outside, and then it goes into the lab, and it gets what we say, we process it. So then it's nice and pretty, and it's safe for future generations. So when you guys decide to become archaeologists, this will be here for you, so you can take a look at it. Let's get on to the good stuff. So we have a number of artifacts that we found from our recent excavations up at the Monticello mountaintop, as well as throughout the plantation. And I'm going to pass this over to my friend and colleague, Beth Sawyer, and she's going to show you some of these cool artifacts. Are you ready for this?
Yeah!
Alright, you guys better put your thinking caps on, because she's got some tricky ones that we're going to need some help with identifying. Ready?
Yeah! 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 Let's go.
Hi, guys.
Hi!
So I'm going to show you some artifacts we've been finding across the big table here up on the mountaintop. And I saw in your questions that you guys were asking about where are we digging and why do we dig and the kinds of things we find. And we did a great job telling you about the process. And this year we're using that same process and digging up by the mansion at a couple of different places. So you guys just saw that video where you got to see some pictures of Monticello?
Yeah!
Great, and you guys heard there's a place called Mulberry Row, which is right next to Monticello, and that was where slaves both lived and worked. There were workshops there where slaves made nails, there were blacksmiths, there were people who made barrels and furniture and all sorts of stuff. So we've been digging by one of those sites called the Joiner's Shop, and we've also been digging by a place called the Weaver's Cottage. And we found some pretty cool stuff. I'm going to hold up some things and see if you guys can guess what they are, okay? This is something found outside of a slave quarter, a slave house. I have to be kind of careful with it. I'll tell you, it's made out of metal. I'm going to hold it. Try to find the camera. You guys can see like a metal disc, and it's got a little guy on a horse on top of it. Any guesses what this might be? I'll show you.
Caroline, go up and down.
Is it money?
It does kind of look like a coin, but it's got, and it's a little hard to see, it's got a thing on the back, like a little attachment. It's broken off up here. Any other guesses? You're really close. It's not money.
Is it a button?
It is a button. Good job. This is a really cool button. We don't have any other buttons that we found, but it's got silver plating. The man on the horse is made in silver, and the backing is pewter. And this would have been on someone's really nice coat.
most likely. So good job guessing on that one. I've got something else in here that was found by the Weaver's Cottage, which was a building that was first used for some of the white workmen who built Monticello in the 1770s, and then later in the 1790s, Jefferson made improvements to his house too. And we did some excavations this year by that building, and we found a couple of these. They're not used that often anymore, but this is half of the top part and would have had something coming off the end. Any guesses on what this little clay thing would have been? It's a little ceramic-y thing.
Is it like chalk?
It does look like chalk. It's made out of clay. It's not chalk, but it's got some stuff, I don't know if you can quite see, molded on the top here. And it's got a little hole on the side and would have had a long piece coming off this way. Any other guesses? This one's really tricky.
Is it an arrowhead?
It does kind of look like an arrowhead. Arrowheads are normally made out of stone, though, so this one's not an arrowhead. Any other guesses? I picked out a hard one.
Is it a necklace?
It does kind of look like that because it has the hole in it. That it could have been like a pendant, but it actually would have been this way. And I'll just go ahead and tell you guys, this one's really hard. This was part of a clay. Oh, sorry, did we have one more guess?
Is it like part of a rock?
It does kind of look like a rock, but it's made out of white clay, and it's actually a tobacco pipe bowl. That was a really hard one. And it's not showing up so well on the camera, so sorry about that. But it's pretty cool. It's got this molded decoration on it, and it's part of a smoking pipe. In the colonial period, especially in the 1770s and 80s in Virginia, tobacco was really, really popular. They didn't know that it made you sick. So everyone bought and used tobacco, and we find lots and lots of these tobacco pipe pieces. So I'm going to show you guys one more. I'm going to make it a little easier. This is something that we found. There's two pieces of it. This might be a little easier to recognize. We find lots and lots of these broken all over the mountaintop. This one came from Mulberry Row as well, and I've got a bigger example I'll show you in a second. But any guesses what this would have come from?
Is it pottery?
It's okay.
Is it pottery?
Okay, there you are. Yes, pottery. Great job. This is two pieces of a plate, and you can see they go together. And sometimes we glue things together, and it would have looked like this when it was all one piece. This is a good example, too. It's kind of cool. B talked about how when we catalog, we record a lot of different information about our ceramics. And you can see this guy is a different color, and it's because it was burned in a fire, whereas these other pieces weren't. So it might tell us that this piece was in a trash pit that was burned, or it ended up in a house that burned down, and these pieces were maybe located somewhere else. So those are some of the details that we record and look at. And at the joiner shop, where we've been doing most of our recent excavations, we find a lot of iron and other metal artifacts that probably aren't going to show up too well. B had showed you some stuff. And one of the reasons we were digging, so here's some iron stuff that we find. One of the reasons we were digging at the joiner shop this year was to try to figure out if people were just working there, or if they were living and working there, what time period they were living there. These are all pieces of information that we don't know from our historical documents. Thomas Jefferson had lots of records that he kept, letters, maps, all sorts of stuff, but the details sometimes that we want are things like who's living in different buildings, when are they living there, what are their professions, and that's what these artifacts are telling us. So when we find lots and lots of these iron pieces, this is part of it's called nail rod, and it's what they would make nails from. This is a piece of nail binder, which would have held all the nail rod together so that it could be carried around the mountain easily. That's the kind of stuff that tells us, oh, this is a place where people are doing work. This is probably not a place where people are living. There's probably not a family living there. Trying to think, anything else be of our artifacts that we found recently we brought with us? I think those are the highlights. Are there any questions about the artifacts you just looked at, or we can start taking some questions?
We can go down the list.
We can go down the list of the ones you guys sent to us. Would that be good? Yeah. Why don't we start there, and then I see we've got some folks that have some additional questions. But we'll start with our list, and B's going to come back.
Thought you were rid of me.
So one of the questions you guys asked about how long we've been doing archaeology and working here. We've been doing archaeology. There's been a department working here since 1980, but I've been an archaeologist since I graduated from college in 2005, so almost 10 years. And I've been working at Monticello for 9 years, and I also did some internships at Montpelier, which is President James Madison's home.
And I've been doing archaeology a little longer, since 1998. Beth and I worked together a while ago in 2001. I also worked at Montpelier. I worked at George Washington's Mount Vernon, Andrew Jackson's Hermitage, and then I did some research up in the Arctic, believe it or not, and even in Tanzania in Africa. So I've bounced around a little bit and been doing archaeology for a while. Now I'm here again.
Someone had asked, why did we choose archaeology as a job? For me, I've always loved history, and I got to do a volunteer dig at Montpelier when I was in college, right after my freshman year of college. And after one day, I knew it was what I wanted to do. It was just so cool to get to handle things for the first time since they had been broken or thrown away in the past. And I just really loved that hands-on piece of history.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is exactly why I got into it. It's a lot of fun. My mom and dad always said that I love to play in the sandbox, so I guess that didn't change. So I love to go outside. I love history. And there's something about when you find an artifact, we call it the bug. Either you get bit by the bug or you don't get bit by the bug, and I got bit. There's something really wonderful and fun about digging, and if you find an artifact from somebody who helped from a long time ago, you're actually touching history. I don't think there's anything else in the world like that. So it's a lot of fun, and it's a lot of hard work, but it is worth it. It is a good time pretty much every day. So, let's see.
You guys had some other really good questions. I'm looking.
Well, we do. One of the questions we asked was whether we find fossils and or bones, and we don't find fossils. I mean, we don't necessarily look to find them. Fossils are studied by paleontologists. So we're archaeologists and we study humans. We're a lot more interested in what humans are leaving behind. But we do find bones. We do find a lot of animals. And here's a really small example. Let's see. Oh, I'm going to take it out of the bag. The bag is shiny. Very shiny. And these have been kind of weathered. Did you see that? Yeah. So these are the types of animal bones. And cow bones and pig bones, chickens, fish, turtle, deer, geese. And the other neat thing about the bones that we find is sometimes they're carved and made into an artifact. And we have something right here. You see this?
Yes.
Maybe we can guess what this is. It's made out of bone. Come on up.
Is it a smoking pipe?
Oh, that's a very good guess. It does have a hole and looks a lot like the pipe that Beth showed you. It's a little different. I can tell you one thing, it feels really comfortable in my hands. Someone else want to guess?
Is it a turtle bone?
I don't know what bone. I think this is probably a cow's or a pig's bone just because of the size of it. Probably more of a cow's bone because of the size to be able to carve it out. But it's an artifact. It actually turned into an implement, something that we actually you and I might use every day during a meal, or it's part of something bigger.
A spoon?
Ooh, very good guess. Yeah, this is probably a utensil handle. It's a handle for something. We would have stuck something in there, an iron, fork, or a spoon, or a knife. So that's a really good guess. So we do find bone, and then we find it carved. We've also found it carved as buttons.
Dominoes. Which were used by both children and adults in the colonial period when Thomas Jefferson was living here. Dominoes were a popular game, so we find a lot of those. Sometimes dice, carved out of animal bone. Mm-hmm. Oh, do we have a question down here?
Was it cinnamon?
Was it cinnamon?
Oh, it does look like a cinnamon stick. Yeah, it was a cinnamon stick. But no, it was one of those utensil handles.
Well, does anybody have a question? Oh, we've got lots of questions. That they want to ask right now? Something that jogged your interest?
Have you found any like iron in there and where you dig?
Any iron? Yeah, we find lots of iron artifacts. Someone had also asked us about if we find things from the mansion, like tools that were used to build the mansion and other things. And Bee's got a big handful here. This is just one handful of some of the iron that we find. Oh, it's flying!
Flying artifacts!
These are nails. Oh, we're going to adjust our camera a little bit.
There you go.
That's easier. So just one handful of nails that we found this year at the joiner's shop. And you can see these all have like handmade heads. They were made by the blacksmith and the nail boys on Mulberry Row at the blacksmith shop and the nailery. And we find lots of that nail rod and those scraps of iron from people doing metal work on the mountaintop.
What object took the longest to find?
What object took the longest to find?
Ooh, that's a tough question.
That is a tough question. I'm trying to think. Well, sometimes we look for things that aren't just artifacts. We often look for remnants of slave quarters or other buildings that we think might be on the mountain, and sometimes those take a long time to find. Mm-hmm. We don't very often go looking for something that we know is lost, per se. So it's normally when we're trying to find where a road used to be or where someone's house used to be that takes quite a while.
One of the things we do on the mountaintop is called survey. And ultimately what we do is every 40 feet we dig a 1-foot hole in the ground. And we do that over the entire plantation. So that's almost 2,500 acres. That's a lot of land. That's a lot of property to cover. And then when we find something in that hole, we record it. Remember all that paperwork I was showing you before? We record it, and then we note it on a map. And once you start to find kind of patterns where you find lots of artifacts in one area, it starts to get us thinking about, well, maybe we should look a little bit closer there. We don't necessarily know anything's there, but by doing the archaeology and doing survey, we find things that may not have been recorded either by Thomas Jefferson or anybody else in the historical period. And we find it from doing some archaeology. And that takes a really long time. It takes a long time. Yeah, we've done something like 30,000 of those, what are called shovel test pits. So 30,000 holes in the ground. And I think Beth and I both have done our fair share of those.
How did you decide to have this job? Like,
Good question.
Like I said earlier, I did an internship at Montpelier in college, and it got me really excited about history and archaeology. So when I went back to school after that summer, I took history classes and archaeology classes and anthropology classes to get me ready to be an archaeologist. I came to Monticello because I like the historic period, so that time period after the English colonists came in 1607. I like that part of Virginia history. And Monticello was a good fit that way. I like learning about the colonial time period. And here at Monticello, Jefferson lived here from 1770 to 1826, so it was right up my alley.
Yeah, it sounds like we did the same thing. I took some classes and really enjoyed it, and then I went out into the field, and it was just a lot of fun. I got bit by the archaeology bug.
What do you think is the most expensive thing you've ever found?
That is a great question, and we saw that on our list, and we were talking on our way down. It's really hard to answer because for archaeologists, everything is really valuable, right? Every artifact tells a story, tells us about the people that used it or made it in the past. If you were trying to sell something on eBay, I don't think you'd like most of the stuff we have. You know, broken pottery, broken nails, big bags of rusty iron, so not really valuable. But we have found mortar. But when we're doing excavations, we have found from time to time coins. We have we find a lot of what are called bits. So they're Spanish coins. I don't think I meant to bring some down, and I didn't bring them down. But they're Spanish coins that were cut into sections. In the colonial times, people could just cut up their money because it was worth its weight in silver. And those little bits of silver, we often find they're little, kind of look like pie wedges of silver. So those are probably the most inherently valuable things that we find. But to us, everything is priceless.
And we actually don't find a lot of gold or diamonds. Silver. When we find silver, we're pretty darn
that's
excited.
a big deal.
So the button that Beth showed you earlier had some silver inlay on it, and then these royales, these little cut coins, are also made of silver. So that's pretty exciting for us.
What tools do you use to dig the holes?
Ooh, good question. We actually usually use shovels. We just use them very carefully. We also use trowels, which are small shovels. We didn't bring one, but they're very small shovels.
They're kind of like a garden spade.
Yep.
Yeah.
We do use brushes sometimes, but really and dustpans. We also use screens so that we screen all of the dirt that we find, and that's really how we find the majority of our artifacts, is we put it through screens. That's really the majority of the stuff we use in the field. In the lab, we use toothbrushes, we use picks, we use microscopes when we need to identify a certain type of material and we can't figure it out. Am I missing anything? Computers.
Yes.
Computers.
Yes. Databases and all that good stuff.
Yep.
Do you ever find like pieces of glasses or anything?
Yes, actually, we have found pieces of spectacles. We'll find the glass lenses themselves, and what we most often find when it comes to glass are window glass fragments or bottle glass fragments. And Dee has a big handful of window glass here. But we have found the metal frames to glasses and the little lenses themselves. We have some up in our archaeology lab, but we didn't bring any with us today. Oh, and one really cool glass artifact that we always like showing folks. We find lots of pieces of broken wine bottles. This is part of a wine bottle. We call it, wine glass. This is part of a stem of a wine glass, so someone would have held it here, and the bowl of the wine glass would be up at the top, and then you'd have a little foot at the bottom. And this one has a beautiful decoration. This is one of my favorite artifacts of all time. And this was made by someone in England in the 1770s, and then shipped all the way across the Atlantic Ocean, and then up the Rivanna River to Jefferson.
Have you found any old toys?
Yeah, yes, we have found some marbles. We found dominoes. We found pieces of dolls. We've found
little teacups from like little tea sets, little porcelain teacups, and they're really tiny. We found one that was pewter, and it was only like a half-inch tall. It was really cute.
Yeah, so we definitely find evidence of children and what they were playing with.
What was the hardest thing you found?
Do you mean something that's like hard to get out of the ground, or something that was difficult to find?
Difficult to find.
Boy, you guys are asking some good questions.
I know. Probably looking for a building is kind of tricky. That survey that Bea was talking about leads us to artifacts, and then we have a better idea of where to dig. But trying to find where a building was, the outline of a building, especially slave quarters that were made all of wood, that's really, really hard to find. I can't think of a time here at Monticello where we've had like a letter saying, you know, I lost my pocket watch when I was out walking today, and we went looking for it. That doesn't happen too often. So I think trying to find those slave quarters or old barns or mills, those are a little trickier to find.
Yeah. To give you a sense, we've been doing this survey that I was talking about since about 1995, and we're not done. We still have a lot more digging to do, and from that we've identified around over 30 sites.
Yeah, I think it's almost 40 now.
40 sites. Yeah. And we still haven't excavated those really fully. Only a few, but we've spent 7 or 8 years at one site, 4 years at another site. So it takes a really long time to find those sites, and then it takes a really long time to even expand the excavation at those sites. So we still have another like 30 sites to go. So I would say that's pretty hard to find the sites and then excavate them all. That's pretty hard.
Have you ever found an artifact from the Revolutionary War?
Not from the war itself. There wasn't any fighting here in Charlottesville. There are lots of Revolutionary War battlefields in Virginia. So archaeologists at Yorktown, Williamsburg, they find those kinds of artifacts. We do find parts of guns, but they're probably hunting guns. So they're from the same time period, but they weren't actually used for fighting the British.
What was the biggest thing you found?
That's another
biggest size thing we found. Lately, I guess for me, I've only been working here since November of last year, so just about a year. So I would say that I guess the one thing we're excavating is the joiner shop, and it's up on Mulberry Row, and that is a really big building. It's 51 feet by 18 feet. And so we always knew it was there. We saw it, the ruins, the chimney was still standing, but now we're excavating inside of it, and that's probably the biggest thing I've ever found or been a part of in finding.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think artifact-wise, this year we found we thought about bringing it, but it wouldn't have showed up too well on the camera. There's this big bracket that was used on the mansion to support what's called a balustrade. It's like a widow's walk on the top, like a balcony on the top of the mansion. That was a very, very large artifact. We found in the 1980s, the archaeologists that were working here found big carriage jacks that were, about 3 feet tall, and that kind of thing. But most of the stuff we find is little.
What was the coolest thing y'all found?
Coolest? Yeah.
Yeah, coolest.
Go ahead. I gotta think about this one for a while.
Here at Monticello, those Spanish coins we were talking about are pretty cool. That button that I showed you guys earlier with the guy riding on the horse, that was pretty cool. Working at other sites, and even here at Monticello, we find Native American artifacts, which I really enjoy. I like thinking about the Europeans first interacting with the Native Americans in Virginia. The Monacan tribe lived in this area, and so we sometimes find little bits of Arrowheads, we call them projectile points. Arrowheads are little bits of pottery. Those make the top of my cool list.
Yeah, I think it was pretty neat when we found that button with the horse, the guy on the horse. That was pretty neat. Sometimes I don't actually I'm not in the field all the time. I work at the computer and do a lot of the cataloging and analysis and kind of the nerdy work. And stuff comes across my desk. And just a couple weeks ago, an iron part came across my desk, and nobody knew what it was. Beth here, and it was a part of a gun, a really big gun, probably for hunting, and nobody had identified it prior to that. So that was pretty neat to find something like that. And then I'm a bit of a ceramics nerd. I like the pottery, and so anytime we get some hand-painted Chinese porcelain, so ceramics and pottery coming all the way from China. Remember, there were no airplanes back then, so this is a pretty long haul. That always gets me really excited. So they're really pretty and painted with really refined decorations of flowers and temples, and I like that stuff. That's pretty fun.
Do you have time for 2 more questions?
Sure. Yeah, we've got time.
So,
I think I know what the stick was. I think it was a part of a toothbrush.
Oh, the bone handle?
Yeah, it does look a lot like a toothbrush handle. We do find lots of toothbrushes, and they were made out of bone. They're normally a little bit flatter, and they wouldn't have the hole in the middle, but that was a really good guess.
Hi, my name's Caroline, and have you found any pieces of clothing?
Ooh. Well, clothing doesn't always last very long. A lot of the stuff that we're showing you is just, it preserves a lot better. Ceramics, glass, iron. Iron gets corroded, mortar, stones, all that stuff lasts. And clothing will deteriorate or fall apart a lot faster, especially when it's exposed to heat. And we get a lot of heat here in Virginia, and rain, just like we did these last few days. So they don't really last that long, but I think there was a piece or a few pieces of something found on Mulberry Row.
In the 1980s, one of the digs on Mulberry Row, they found a little piece, it was only about that big, of what was probably burlap, or it could have been a really coarse homespun fabric, but it was really small. So most of what we find is things like pins, buttons, hook and eyes, which were, you have like a little, it's called an eye, so a little, I'm trying to get my hands right, round part, and then a hook that would attach. It's a type of fastener type of clothing. So those hard bits, like Bea was saying, those preserve a lot better than the cloth.
okay, that's all of our questions.
Oh, I couldn't hear that. Was that?
Oh, that
you...
was their last question.
Oh, okay, great.
Well, thank you guys. It was really fun talking with you. And if you are so interested, we're actually having an open house at Monticello tomorrow. I know you'll be in school, but we're also having it on Saturday. And it's free, and it's family friendly, and we're going to have activities and events. We're actually going to have artifacts out that you can handle and touch. And if you want, you can bring your parents, and they can learn a little bit about archaeology now that you're the expert. So we're doing that tomorrow and Saturday from 10 till 4 p.m.
All right,
Thank you.
Bye.
You're welcome.